Hello and welcome. I'm Daniel Erulian and I'm joined by Chloe Fraser from Folk Jewellery. We're just on a little working holiday here in the beautiful, gorgeous Bunya Mountains in Queensland, Australia. And we've just been chatting about how gaming has influenced both our creativity in our businesses, but also our ability to approach life in a practical, problem solving way. And I think the big thing that clicks for both of us, both on the aspect of RPGs and kind of gamifying, leveling up in life, and understanding that everything is really just part of a skill tree, but realizing that going from different system to different system is so applicable to learning new things. And we've both talked about, we've had experiences with people that just have this massive block to learning new things, this identity that they are not good with technology, or they are not good with this, or they can't learn that, and they're not naturally talented. And I think we both agree that, yeah, there is natural talent, but a lot of it is just being open to being bad at things. And I think the RPG element is really interesting, especially when people talking about how people identify, because if people identify as someone that's bad at something, they really can't ever get good at it because they've already identified as someone who's bad at it. But I don't believe anyone is naturally bad at something. It's just you haven't done it. But that idea of changing your class, changing, your identity as a character in a role-playing game. Yes, maybe like a mage isn't as good at using a sword, but what if I change my identity to a warrior? And and having that adaptability and that changeability of my identity, that idea that the ego is fine as long as it's fluid and it's not static and getting in the way. It's just something that we've been chatting about a lot lately.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with games as well, across games is a skill that kind of gets forgotten about. I think with generations, we're so used to, like the radio was always, something that was going to melt your brain, and the TV was going to be something that was going to melt your brain. I feel like every generation has had something like that. And for this generation, it's been games.
Yeah.
And they have been they've been kind of like demonized a little bit because they're, captivating kids' minds too much and all this stuff. It's going to, turn them into vegetables. But the reality is, and I think particularly for my reality and in what I'm seeing that's translated across so many parts of my life, is that it's given me extraordinary problem solving skills. And that comes across so many different types of games. But particularly games that, we both click on, RPGs, it is a lot of problem solving. And I think that that's kind of a skill that doesn't get flexed for a lot of people. And I noticed it particularly when I was studying jewellery. There's been a lot of influence from video games in what I do today. But one thing that definitely came across for me heavily was the fact that when I was learning, it gave me a skill to be able to use, in that I can find opportunities where people wouldn't usually. And I would problem solve probably a little bit easier than what most people did. And slowly unpacking that, it's been really great because, something that I've kind of always been told I'm wasting my time on. I'm actually starting to realize that there are so many skills that have been picked up from in the game world rather than, melting my brain.
Yeah, and I love that you've kind of reignited my love and changed my narrative around, because I grew up playing RPGs like Final Fantasy, and they really influence my view of the world, like seeing everything as a scavenger hunt and this beautiful place, and even like changing my morals, trying to do good, my wanting to build a team and like a party to go around and venture and save the world and all that sort of stuff. I know it sounds a bit silly, but these were also my influences on who I wanted to be like, and understanding, again, like the problem solving aspect, that if I don't get something right the first time, that's actually a good thing, because it makes me kind of step back. And anyone who's played games knows that you aren't supposed to win the first time you do it. You kind of learn and you make mistakes. And it seems like the modern day, as soon as someone makes a mistake, they're like, oh, I'm doing it wrong, I'm bad at this, I've got to stop. Like, if that was the case, then no one would ever finish games. Like some games are actually, like, if you ever played these kind of roguelike ones where like Hades, if you played Hades, where you actually you're supposed to die. You can't beat the game in the first round, because you have to die, and then you go back to a certain, and then the story advances. And so it's actually showing you the importance and the necessity of failing, because then it changes your perspective on the next run. And yeah, do you see that a lot as well? Like, people like make an error or make a mistake and they're like, oh, I'm bad at this, better give it up now.
100%. They identify with that and they go, you know, this isn't my thing. I can't do this. I think a big thing with video games, and like studies have shown, that it does boost your grit and it boosts your discipline. And I think that's really like invaluable and really sort of underrated when it comes to, you know, that coming from video games. And I also think as well, like, we are in today's day and age in a very fast paced, very changeable environment where things are moving really fast. You know, 50 years ago, totally different story. And I think that those skills have translated in that we can adapt a lot quicker. And video games helps with that. You know, if you chop and change from different types of games and different types of worlds, and you're learning new environments and you're learning new skills, I think that's a really great skill that translates into you know, this environment. But yeah, definitely discipline. Discipline's a huge one. You know, you don't get anywhere with video games without a massive amount of discipline. And I know that might sound a bit strange, because you think of video gamers and they're all, you know, eating Cheetos in their parents' basement without jobs. But yeah, I'm actually finding quite the opposite, which is interesting to sort of slowly unfold.
Yeah, and that's like one of the main bits that I wanted to chat to you about it. In that, while we were talking on the car ride here, how sometimes that skill that is learnt in gaming isn't applied into the everyday world. And why sometimes you see people like the cliched gamer as someone who just stays inside and doesn't really venture out into the world. And it just seems like a simple thing for us, for those skills that we have learnt playing games, leveling up, approaching every system as a new way of learning. Yes, we can take a little bit from what we've learned, but more so it's taking that discipline, understanding that this game could be completely different to that one, but understanding that it's just another learning process. You know, I was fumbling over the buttons and I was fumbling over learning what to do in this game. So that's probably going to happen in the next one, but having more resilience and even an understanding of that's a natural part of the process. But I don't know, like, it's really tricky to find the key, that how do we take those skills that we learn in gaming and apply them to life? And like, how do we help others to build that bridge?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And as we were talking in the car on the way up here, something that I think we're both kind of stuck on in our own brains. I think there's kind of two different people when it comes to video games. It's a gross generalization, but there's kind of a bit of a, you know, it's a sliding scale. But there are a lot of people who get stuck in that world and they use gaming as an escape. And I've got to say, when I was playing World of Warcraft, that's 100% what it was. You know, I was in school, I hated it. And so I ran away to the World of Warcraft world. But as a result, you know, I took a lot of those things from games, like design elements and inspiration. And it is the reason that I am an artist today. And it's the reason for a lot of things. But I think that there is a huge amount of people that don't get out of that. There is a huge amount of people that, you know, use it as their crutch. You know, some people use drugs, some people use alcohol, some people use video games. And how to shift that in people, how to express to people that what they're learning through being that Cheeto eating guy stuck in a basement, they're learning amazing world skills that they can, take into the real world and use elsewhere.
Yeah, and that's, so the students that have come to my courses, like my yoga teacher training, have seen that I've basically gamified the whole thing. And that's all from the influence of RPGs, because I think a lot of the time in general day-to-day life, we maybe don't have those acknowledgements that we've actually built skill in something until there's like a big threshold. It's like that idea of, the bamboo isn't seen, it could be growing underneath the ground for so long, but then suddenly it shoots up out of nowhere. Or that analogy of the melting ice cube where, ice melts at a certain temperature, but sometimes if we're heating up the room, we don't necessarily see that anything is happening, but it's that last bit of degree that actually melts the ice cube, and it seems like it's suddenly happened, but it's actually all that work that's been put in so far to heating up that room that eventually culminates in the melting of the ice cube. And I think in day-to-day life, we often see things as the threshold crossed, and we don't necessarily see the benefits or, the immediate gratification of all that work that's put in the meantime. And I think RPGs do a good job of distributing that immediate gratification, because you level up quite quickly. And as well, they've done it well in that usually in a game, you start to get those levels up really, really quickly. But then later it takes longer, but it expands outwards. And I think that approach has really helped me to understand. I mean, there's lots of research and like amazing TED Talks and stuff on gamification of courses and learning and psychology. But yeah, so for me, I think the main benefits that has come immediately from gaming is one, my kind of aesthetic and worldview. I understand that the world could be seen more magically by simply shifting how I perceive things and being influenced by the worlds that I've been in these RPGs. The problem solving skills, in that everything is its unique problem, and even though the skills may not be immediately seen as transferable, I think, as Chloe mentioned, it's really the discipline and just being the okayness with not being great at something, because it's part of the process. But then the last part is seeing everything as a skill tree, and including confidence in speaking as well. I mean, like I always have been a bit of like a kind of semi-introvert, semi-extrovert, but speaking is a skill. And I've done a lot of sales training and I've done a lot of speaking practice as well, and simply just done the thing. And what's helped me is like when I'm even confidence with people, right? If I am stumbling over, it's like, okay, I haven't been working on my speaking skill tree, or I haven't been working on this skill tree. I haven't been working on this skill tree. So of course I'm not good at it. I might be like, level 50 in this thing, but it doesn't necessarily translate into this other thing. And it may feel like it's like adults don't want to start from scratch, but see it as fun. It's like you're starting a whole new skill tree. Like you get to advance in that. So yeah, I'd love to maybe like go over your transferable skills from the game.
Yeah, I mean, definitely my aesthetic has certainly been influenced by games. I feel like rather than watching movies and watching TV when I was growing up, it was a lot more playing video games. And so, yeah, I feel like a lot of my aesthetics kind of taken from this, like, elven-y, mythical, weird, wonderful game land, which in the long run has led me down the path of becoming an artist. I mean, I think I was always kind of destined to becoming an artist, but games definitely did help me with that. And I think just the inspiration from games kind of being a culmination of every single part of the arts. In everything from story writing to like skill trees and problem solving to like just the general aesthetic and music and everything. Like it does kind of integrate everything, and so I think that definitely heavily influenced my aesthetic and my career choice. But yeah, hugely so in problem solving, and I think that's just maybe it's a very general statement to say, has just influenced problem solving. But I guess when I look at it, for me, problem solving is always like nothing's been off the table for me. And I don't know how much that's been influenced from video games or my upbringing in general, but there's been nothing that I've not wanted to have a go at. And I do think that that's been flavored by video games for sure. You know, when you're playing games that have like certain classes, it's like, I want to try every single one. And that has, I guess, translated across, you know, adulthood. It's like, you know, I am this person, so that means I can't do this skill. Like, I can't, that doesn't sit well in my brain at all. And so I have to try everything, you know, like I have to like give everything a little go. And I understand that when I'm starting something, I am starting at level 1. And it is going to be a process, you know, when I'm level 50 at this thing, doesn't mean that, you know, that levels across the board. And I guess it's made me less afraid to start things, and definitely like a full understanding that when I start something new, that I am going to be crap at it. But as I've seen so many times before, with time and grit and discipline, things start to grow. And yeah, I guess that's definitely something that I've picked up through gaming.
Yeah, and I see that a lot with what you're doing in that, you know, you've obviously really honed in and leveled up in a particular aspect of your jewelry craft. But you're like, I'm going to go do a blacksmithing course and then I can weave that into that. And so I love it because I see it as well. Like, I see it's like, cool, you've mastered like your current style of creating jewelry, and then you're going to go like really level up this skill tree, but then eventually they'll kind of meet together and you're going to weave them together. So yeah, it's the synthesis as well. And that's why I think that's what gets me even more excited about like life outside of the game as well, because the game is pre-constructed. There's only certain skill trees you can ever do in the game unless they add like DLC or something. But in life, there's actually we could actually possibly create skill tree like branches that have never been done before, or at least not done in the way that we're doing them. So I think that's what really excites me about life in general as well, is that there's infinite possibilities of what we can do. And I think that's such a human thing, to create new things, to synthesize things. We want to take things and mix them together and create our own version, and someone else gets inspired by that. And I just love humans inspiring each other.
Yeah.
When I started making music, I would listen to other musicians and artists and producers, and they would inspire me to create something different. And, you know, you know, always like supporting all your other jurors who inspire you, and even like games re-inspiring us, and how you've really like helped me to change my narrative around how I'm like now I'm an adult, I should be doing work and like not doing, but I'm realizing that playing a game like levels me out. It kind of calms my nervous system down, quiets my chattery mind, and all those ideas start to percolate in the background while I'm relaxing and enjoying, but also getting inspired by new worlds I'm exploring, new methods, and reminding myself that, as everything we talked about, that everything is a process, and yeah, never be afraid to start fresh again.
Yeah, for sure.
So just to close this little video off, we thought we would touch on the people who haven't necessarily had the blessing of being introduced to games, or haven't really dived into it or been able to see the benefits from it, but also how the people who have played games who haven't been able to transfer those skills into the world outside of the game. So Chloe's just going to quickly speak on to the people who may not have been introduced to games yet, and maybe what the benefits would be to get yourself into gaming and how to do it.
Yeah, for sure. So if you are someone who has not been in the gaming world and has thought about dipping your toe in, I think changing your mindset around it, it's one of those things where I feel like so many people go, I'm not a gamer, so I'm not going to touch it. But I think that in itself is a great skill to break, in that starting a video game, knowing that you're going to be crap at it and that it is going to artistically inspire you, it's going to build discipline, it's going to build grit, it's going to help problem solving, and it's not a waste of time. I think changing that mindset is huge. And yeah, just that beginning phase, I think I can't express enough how important it is to not identify with someone who doesn't do a thing, because that straight away is going to stop you. If you say to yourself, I'm not a gamer, I've never gamed before, I'm going to be terrible at it, you're going to be terrible at it. So yeah, I would say just dip your toe in. Play something that's maybe multiplayer, you can play with friends, and yeah, play with friends. I think that's a really good thing, rather than sort of like trying to figure it out in yourself, and then it becomes a communal thing as well. You're not just hanging out in your basement, you're hanging out with friends and building skills. Yeah.
Oh, massively. And that's even in some courses that I've run, I've actually early on in the course, even though it's completely irrelevant to the course, I've got them to download like a free game to play and learn how to play it, because if they can do that, then they can, build the skills to learn how to study and how to do this course and how to problem solve and how to not be great at something first. Because I think that is such a fundamental transferable skill. So on the other end of it, people who may have been into games but may not have translated it. So like the most common thing I think, because I've had a lot of gamer friends over the years, but a common thing is they do seem naturally more introverted. And may not be going out to parties or social settings as much, but it can be applicable to everything. But because of what I do, like primarily what I'm doing is helping to teach people to teach and to speak more. I think the obvious skill tree bridge for me is something like social settings or public speaking and things like that. And for me, with any skill, I kind of reverse engineer it. And so if you look at usually just say like Skyrim, for example, you could see where all those skills lead, or you're like, okay, I want to eventually have that skill because that looks awesome. Then I have to get this first, then this first, and this first, and this first. But kind of know where it's leading, or at least have an idea where it's leading. And so, for example, if you're like, I want to be able to go to a party and be able to be confident and feel confident and actually enjoy the social interactions and things like that, I'd be like, cool, what do you need to develop first? You want to obviously develop being able to talk about certain things. And so for me, there'd be two parts of it. There'd be like the study knowledge aspect of it, and then there'd be the actual practicing in the field. And so something that I do for my students, get them to film themselves talking, right? And so you could be like, okay, well, I love talking about gaming, or I love talking about this subject, but what about talking about a subject that you don't know as much of? Or maybe something that would be across the board. So you could be like, okay, I'm going to find a subject and just quickly learn a little bit about it and try talking about that to a camera, or even just, you don't have to do it to a mirror or anything, just simply doing it while you're walking around. So I would immediately start doing that, and then starting to level up on that, and then try it out in the field. So trying it out in the practice arena, it's like you're doing the tutorial, you're doing it with the practice, and then you actually go and try it out. But just realizing that when you go and try it out, you're going to learn, you're going to approach issues, and that's the point. I think a lot of people misunderstand those messages from the world, being like, okay, if I mess up out in the field, out in the world, when I'm trying these skills, that's bad. But that's actually what you want, because if you don't get those errors, if you don't get those mishaps, you're not going to learn how to be better at it. Imagine if you went through an entire game and the entire first half of the game was way too easy, and then suddenly the difficulty spiked up, and then you haven't built any practical skills to be able to achieve what you want. It's kind of like you've been floating through the game and it's been too easy. You haven't developed those muscles from the resistance. And so just being okay with messing up. And yes, it could be embarrassing in like a public social setting. But for example, I have a friend who, when she was starting to do gigs and music, she didn't want to do her open mics in front of anyone she knew. She drove like an hour and a half out of the way to go into a little bar that she didn't know anyone to practice her gigging and practice her open mic there, then eventually built confidence. So it's understanding what are your practice arenas and environments that you can do things in, what knowledge do you need to accumulate before that, and then what practices can you do to set out. And yeah, just having that approach and like gamifying things that you do, it can be really, really amazing. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for now. We could talk about this all day, but we wanted to keep this video fairly short. But yeah, if you're not familiar with what we do, so my name's Daniel Erulian. I obviously run yoga teacher training. I run other courses like Mage, which is all about gamifying every aspect of your life and diving into meditation and a gamified approach to life. And then Chloe can tell a little bit about her jewelry and what she does.
Yeah, I'm Chloe Fraser, and I am the owner and creator of Jewellery. So I make sterling silver and solid gold jewelry with mainly Australian opals. Yeah,
She makes cool stuff.
thanks.
Very cool stuff. Cool. Well, yeah, let us know in the comments if you found this valuable. And yeah, I'd love to know other ways that you've been able to bring gaming elements into your day-to-day life.
For sure. What good influences have games had on you guys?
We need to change people's perspective on gaming because I think people are really missing out by not bridging these worlds.